So our business editor, Owen Fairclough, here. Owen, we're going to go straight to that Spain bank bailout. The money starting to flow, do we think?
Absolutely. By the end of the month, Stuart, we should see at least 30 billion euros being pumped directly into Spain's banks, essentially to keep them and this country afloat right now. We've had another all-night meeting, pretty much all-night meeting from Europe's finance ministers who got together to thrash out the details of a deal that was put together by Europe's leaders a little earlier this month. Just to give you just to take you through even some of the details on that, as I say, 30 billion euros should be ready for Spain by the end of this month. These finance ministers have decided on that. Perhaps more importantly for the Spanish government right now, which is really suffering under the weight of all its sovereign debt, it will be given an extra year to bring its budget deficit down to acceptable and agreed levels by the EU by the end of 2014. That's around 12 months longer than most European countries are being given. So those finance ministers are cutting the Spanish a little bit more slack. There are question marks, though, that remain over this deal, particularly among the Finnish and the Dutch, both of whose governments have to ratify this deal. Remember, they've led a little bit of a northern European rebellion over this deal, unhappy with some of the terms of these bailout deals. There's also concern over what they call preferred creditor status. Essentially, that is a flashpoint over who would get money first in the event of a Spanish or indeed an Italian or indeed a Greek default.
Those two points there with your question marks, just looking at your graphic, I mean, they are potential big problems, aren't they?
Absolutely, because the Finnish is particularly are concerned about this preferred creditor status. What they're talking about there is that this new bailout fund, there was concern that this new bailout fund, the European Stability Mechanism, would be given what's known as preferred creditor status. What that means is all those investors who've got shares in Spanish banks, there was concern that they would be given preferential treatment should those banks and indeed Spain go under. The Finnish were very unhappy about that. Understandably, if their government is putting up money through these bailout funds, they want to make sure they get it back. The Finnish particularly or the Finns have been very insistent that they want some sort of collateral from these countries. And we still don't really know what the position is there on that, despite the fact that these European leaders are saying the issue is settled. The Finns will probably tell you that for their money, it isn't quite in black and white yet.
And the big question for Spain, of course, is it going to be enough to ease their borrowing conditions?
Well, we'll get a better idea of that, of course, once the European markets open in just over an hour's time. Remember, Spain's borrowing cost topped 7% going into that summit on Monday evening. There are the numbers for you there on 10-year bond yields. Spain's borrowing costs back and up and indeed over 7%, the danger zone for all these European countries. It's been the consensus is that countries like Spain cannot go on borrowing at those kind of levels for very much longer.
Now, we had this good news overnight, really. We had a bit of an early rally on the Asian markets, didn't we? But they've fizzled out a little bit.
Yeah, is that a sign for things to come? Investors don't seem that impressed with this deal so far. You can see there all the Asian markets off slightly. The Nikkei off by around 0.2%. We had Alcoa, the world's biggest aluminium producer, reporting earnings, a $2 million loss. That is generally seen as a bit of a bellwether for how other companies are likely to perform for second quarter results.
OK, we've got a new top story for you now, because Owen Fairclough is going to eat some humble pie on France 24.
I did.
It's a first.
I should have gone and bought some, shouldn't I? After the last bulletin.
Yeah.
An unprecedented moment for France. It quietly auctioned off around 3 billion euros of government bonds of between 3 and 6 months duration. And how about this? They got negative yields on those bonds. What that means is that investors are actually paying the French government to lend it money. So they're parking their money with the French government for negative interest. Only countries like Germany and occasionally the UK get this kind of thing because they are seen as rock solid countries. The French, we know, have been a little bit less than rock solid, of course, with that downgrade and the fact that lots of investors were concerned that President François Hollande would take France on a bit of a spending spree. It hasn't happened yet, and we're seeing negative yields.
Unprecedented moment for us as well. Thanks very much. Now, let's pick up on a few more of the day's business headlines. And we're going to start in Norway. In fact, whose government has broken a national oil strike. Around 6,000 employees were due to freeze production in a dispute over benefits for those who retire earlier than the legal age of 65. Now, ministers say they've resolved the situation, though they haven't given details yet of the deal struck with the unions. The possibility of a strike had earlier sent the price of Brent crude up by nearly 2% to $99 a barrel.
Marcus Agius, the chairman of Barclays Bank, will give evidence to the UK Parliament in the rate-rigging scandal later this Tuesday. Agius quit the disgraced firm only to be reinstated when Chief Executive Bob Diamond also stood down after the bank was fined millions of pounds for manipulating interbank lending rates. His testimony follows that of Bank of England Governor Paul Tucker, who denied giving Barclays permission to proceed with the fraud back in 2008.
And the parent company, British Airways and Iberia, is to sell bonds on its runway slots. IAG Group plans to raise £250 million, giving investors the chance to buy lucrative takeoff and landing spaces. It is the first time a covered bond backed by airport slots has been issued in Europe. The US companies have been doing it, in fact, for some time.
OK, we're going to stay in British skies for a moment because Britain's Farnborough International Air Show is well underway. Both Russian and Chinese manufacturers are this year trying to break into a growing market for smaller planes aimed at the lucrative low-cost market. But that means taking on the two biggest rivals in the game, Boeing and Airbus, who are fighting their own battle for supremacy. Siobhan Silk has the story.
With its carbon plastic body, the next generation of Boeing's 787 Dreamliner made an impression on its flyover at Farnborough Air Show. But it's the less glamorous world of narrow-body planes made for short-haul flights that Boeing is relying on to fill the order books. It landed the first major deal at Farnborough, announcing a $7.2 billion order from US airline Air Lease for 75 fuel-efficient 737 MAX jets. The 737 covers the same market as the updated A320 from Airbus. Boeing has trailed its France-based rival for almost a decade, but CEO Jim McNerney predicts the 737 MAX will help the US constructor rise to the top. Airbus isn't ready to concede yet, saying it will still be ahead of Boeing at the end of this year.
We have a competitor who is trying to come back, and so he's very aggressive regarding the prices. But we keep the line, we keep cool. We have already 1,400 aircraft in the order book, so we are not in a rush.
Leaving the luxury sector to Boeing and Airbus, new entrants are more interested in targeting the continued growth of low-fares airlines. Russian constructor Irkut debuted a plane especially designed for the sector with lower production costs and features such as extra-large space for cabin baggage.
It is possible to install the standard luggage on the sideway, lower cost in production. Then it's very high operational effectiveness. It gives a possibility to them to reduce on approximately 10% your ticket price.
Irkut already has 235 orders for the craft, which is due to enter service in 2017. Airbus is keeping an eye not just on Boeing, but on the upstarts, saying it plans to spend €2 billion on research and development this year to help keep them at bay.
Yeah, Farnborough Air Show brings back memories to me, I must say. And now, Samsung, they've run a rare victory in the copyright war. This is probably not one to shout about, though.
Not when your tablet that you're hinging a lot of your fortunes on is described by, of all people, a British judge as not cool enough to be confused with an iPad. This is, of course, at the heart of the patent disputes between Apple and Samsung, with Samsung being accused by Apple of copying the design and many of the patents on its iPad. But a judge who's ruling on this case say they do not have the same understated and extreme simplicity which is possessed by the Apple design. They are not as cool. That's about Samsung's Galaxy tablet. It is a victory, though, because it means that Samsung won't be banned from selling this product in the UK. And, of course, it has had bans on some of its smartphones and that same tablet in various countries around the world, including the United States, but has had some grace there with the appeals court lifting a freeze on the Galaxy Nexus smartphones. But, yeah. A British judge, of all people, describing
something as not very cool.
Samsung as not cool.
They need to do something to make it cooler. Give it some trendy trainers or something. All right, Owen, thank you very much. Owen with the business. More from him, of course, just over an hour's time. Kat's got the latest after the break. So yes.